Hello, ladies, and welcome to this episode of Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where you can listen to previous episodes as well as this one and see some of the visuals with the us talking here today and get some of the show notes, that kind of thing, by going to autoimmunerehab.com. And today's episode is sponsored by my 30-day self-care journal template that you can download for free, that you'll find the link in the show notes by going to analarabrown.com/self-care. And today I am really happy to have Laura Christine on the call. Yes, I know my name is Anna Laura and I'm interviewing a Laura Christine. How's that for being really awesome? Anyhow, why don't you go ahead, Laura Christine, and start off by telling us, the audience that is, a little bit about you.
Sure. My name's Dr. Laura Christine. I'm a traditional naturopath who actually is into gardening. And I just, we're going to be talking about autoimmune and all of that stuff. My path into all of this was when I got sick. So I love what I do. I'm a mom of 3 kids, wife, and I'm always out in the garden.
That's awesome. Yeah, and she actually has written a book as well that I also downloaded and skimmed through. And I know that in many respects, your journey for even getting your autoimmune diagnosis, your healing, that kind of thing, is pretty similar to a lot of the other guests we've had. Pretty typical. Can't get an answer from the very first few doctors. Takes you a lot longer than it should to actually finally find out what's going on. Why don't you share with us a little bit about how that worked for you?
Sure. Well, it was of course I was unaware. This is about 10 years ago, unaware that things were kind of falling apart physically with my body. I ignored it. And then one day my body just said, I can't take it anymore. And basically head to toe pain was on the couch. And then I started looking for help. And I got a lot of answers from the medical community that it was all in my head. And I'm like, I had been fully functional, a week ago. So that took me about a year and a half to kind of figure out that wasn't the answer for me, and ran into a friend who suggested a functional medicine chiropractor. And I thought, well, I have nothing to lose. And so I worked with her for about 3 years straight. And we basically helped, supported my body back to, I would say, about 90%. And then the next 4 to 5 years, I worked on getting, trying to get that other, 10%, 10 to 15%, get 100% back. But I did a lot of searching, did a lot of supplementation and detoxing and infrared saunas, massages, myofascial release therapy, which is a type of massage. I mean, I was willing to try anything and everything to get my body back to where it needed to be. And then that's how I just kind of, it's probably not fair to say I fell into naturopathy, but I was doing it already for myself. So I figured, why not? I've been there, done that. And, I don't know about how many of the listeners on this podcast, and I know for sure I wish it was a quick fix. I wish it would have been, a week or 2 and it would go away, but it took me a good 7 years to heal. And I'm about 95%, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty typical journey. And I think most of the people that are listening to this have already come to the conclusion that it's not going to be a quick fix. By the time you come across this podcast, you probably already realized that. But,
yes,
it's, and I think functional medicine chiropractors are really underestimated. A lot of people, They think chiropractor and they only think back adjustment, back pain, that kind of thing. They don't realize that they can actually do a lot more than that.
Oh, gosh,
so,
yes.
That's definitely a resource to look into, especially if you aren't getting the answers from your current medical team or healthcare providers that you are seeking with. And of course, naturopathy is always an option as well. So you became more or less this naturopath after you already had your own personal health issues, right?
Correct. Yes. And one of my, if you want to call it, specialties is to work with people in chronic pain, because I've been there, done that. Yes.
Yep, and I'm finding that that's a really common thread too. I know that's what got me into all the health stuff too, was that I had my own issues, so then I wanted to start helping people as well too. And yeah, for sure. So
And who
talk to us
better?
a little bit
Yeah,
about your approach with the chronic pain. Do you do like virtual telehealth with people? You meet with people
I
in person? You
I
have,
do
what's
both.
your approach?
I do both. I'm here in the Kansas City Metro, so of course, the people in Kansas City Metro, I will see person, face to face, but I do virtual. And I do a lot of, I call them nutritional questionnaires, where we examine all of your habits, your dietary habits, your exercise habits, your thinking, because as a naturopath, and I'm sure you know this as a health coach, it's not just one little symptom, the body out of whack. It's the whole person. It's the whole soul, body, spirit. It all works together. So, but yes, I work with virtual as well as local Metro KC.
Oh, absolutely. It is the whole body, spirit, soul, the whole thing. And that's honestly one of the reasons that I feel like your functional medicine, chiropractic, even your acupuncturist, why they are a lot, Eastern medicine, why they're a lot more successful at helping with autoimmune conditions is because regular medicine teaches them, for the most part, to just specialize in one specific thing and they don't look at the rest of your body. So, for
No,
example, with me
yeah,
and Hashimoto's and the thyroid, a lot of traditional Western medicine would say only look at your thyroid.
correct.
Well, your thyroid impacts all kinds of things in your
Everything.
body, a
Yeah.
lot more in your body than what many people are led to
Yes.
believe. And if you're listening to
Yes.
this and have thyroid issues and haven't realized that it's not just about your thyroid, well, this is the day for you to actually realize that.
Yes, and it's sad it's structured that way, but also, like you mentioned, acupuncture and those, a lot of my training is in traditional historical medicines that have been around for thousands of years. So they may look at it a little differently, but it's always those types of traditions always look at the whole body. It would be great if you could just say, well, I'm losing my hair. I just need to take, something to shore it back and we're fine. But no, you have to kind of dig and discover and figure it out.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's another reason why just taking thyroid medication doesn't fix most people's thyroid issues, is because it's not just about the thyroid. It's about other
Correct.
aspects of your body. And
And then
yeah,
unfortunately, yeah, and in my experience, when I started first with the allopathic medical model, they put me on a drug, and that created something else. And then, and at that point, 10, 15 years ago, I was still athletic enough. I grew up as an athlete, so I was always in good shape and all of this stuff. They put me on a medication and then added to that. So I was on two meds and then did blood work, and they're like, you have high cholesterol. And I'm like, what? And that actually is part of my wake up. Like, how can I have high cholesterol? I run, I do this, I do that. How can I, it just didn't make any sense. But a lot of times those medications, of course, they have side effects. It's a chemical. So,
yeah, absolutely. They absolutely have side effects, and they don't fix the problem in general either. And that's
nope.
what a lot of people either don't realize, or what they sooner or later come to realize once they've been on one, or once they've been a little farther down the journey, start to realize, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah,
this isn't
exactly.
this isn't what I thought.
Yeah. It may quote unquote squelch the symptom temporarily, but yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, it's interesting. And we're kind of conditioned to think, I think our culture is a quick fix, and those of us that don't do the quick fix, of course, because of our experience, no, it takes a while, but it's worth it on the other side. It's definitely, I've learned a lot and feel great. I've been pain free for 7 or 8 years now. And yeah, it's been fantastic.
That's awesome. Yeah, for sure. So, talking about that, saying that you specialize in helping people with chronic pain, what typically is going on in someone's life that someone's going to come hire you and say, okay, this is it, I've had enough?
Well, a typical client has tried Western medicine, and typical, which is interesting too. A lot of the doctors say it's in your head because they can't figure it out. And there's a lot of chaos in the way they think, chaos in their diet, even a spiritual kind of chaos. And maybe that's not the right word, but there's just a lot going on, all of those different pieces. And of course, the body, When it says it's had enough, it has enough. A lot of people, chronic pain, and I never like to label things out there, but it kind of, there is a pattern to when the body has had enough, when the adrenals are shot because of a poor diet, or just outside stresses, whether it's maybe you're exercising way too much in addition to being stressed out and eating incorrectly. And that of course was my story. I always ate on the run, out of a window, as we say. Yeah, it's a lot of different conditions that the typical medical model cannot figure out. And they sometimes will send the clients to, or their patients to, a dietitian, but that sometimes can be even limited too. So, but it's people with chronic, it's usually a chronic pain is going on. And they, that's the typical client for me. I hope I answered.
Yeah,
that.
that's awesome. That's good. That's for sure. That's yeah, I know I've definitely had, unfortunately, my own fair share of pain, but fortunately I almost never get pain anymore.
Yep.
So that's really
Yep.
nice life once you actually figure out how to not have that be a part of your life anymore, or
Yes.
I occasionally get a little bit of a flare up, I can fix it within less than an hour. So,
Yes.
that's great.
And when it flares up, you're like, what in the world is this? It's just like, hey, this is not going to happen. Yeah, that's my attitude of like, where did this come from? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly. For
yeah.
sure.
Cool.
Let's transition a little bit into the whole garden thing then.
Sure.
I think a lot of us, especially if you're listening to this, you've woken up hopefully to the idea that you need to make diet changes and that you're not going to just heal yourself without them. And many of you listening probably already have at least started down that road. So obviously a lot of us know that, the state of food in today's world is not the greatest. A lot of the so-called food at the store isn't actually really food, and our great grandparents probably wouldn't even recognize it as food.
Right.
And so were you gardening at all before this happened, or how did this whole gardening evolution come about?
Well, it's funny. I actually have been gardening all my life. I started when I was like 8 years old with my mom, and that was actually one of my outlets, all through my adult life. And about 5 years ago, I was like, I could probably help people this way, teach them how to. And I try to go as organic as possible. It's impossible to be 100% organic, unfortunately, just because of what's in the air. Water is a biggie, but it just kind of switched over to adding the gardening to help people. Then where your food's coming from, and where the seeds are coming from, and that's kind of how I segued. But I've been gardening all my life. And when I was doing the naturopathy, I had somebody just say, you should teach people. And I thought, I never thought of that, but why not? So it was a natural transition for me.
For sure, absolutely. And then now I know that you have like some ebooks that you've written about gardening, that kind of thing. You have like a YouTube channel where you teach people how to garden. Do you
Yes.
do like in-person consults with people that are in the area for gardening?
Yeah,
too,
I
as
kind
well?
of do the same that I do with the naturopathy. I'm doing the virtual if virtual is needed. I have some people that'll just call me on the phone if they don't feel comfortable with doing a Zoom call. And then in the KC Metro, it's usually face to face. I've taught some classes for different groups. And then I'm also like a keynote speaker. So, and I work my gardening and my naturopathy kind of together. People can pick a topic and I'll work it into whatever. But yeah, I like to do both as far as the virtual or the in-person in the KC Metro. So,
That's
and
awesome.
it's anywhere from, just basics. I used to build raised beds, but my biggest problem in the past year or two is just finding people to help. It's been really difficult finding people to help build the raised beds because it's quite an ordeal to put in raised beds, and then we plant them and put in irrigation and all of that. And I've just had difficulty with that. So I've kind of segued into, I can help you learn how to plant your garden and make, wise choices that way. Or if your organization needs a speaker with a different twist, I can do that. So I kind of whatever. Gardening works in a lot of, a lot of areas, and a lot of platforms.
Yeah, that's awesome for sure. Yeah, I love that. So how, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't. What approximately, it doesn't have to be exact, percentage
Sure.
of your actual, like fruit and vegetable consumption would you say you're able to actually grow in your garden without having to go buy it somewhere else or get it from another garden? Or
About 75%.
wow, that's
So,
pretty high.
and that's in
Awesome.
the summer. Of course, here in
Yeah.
Kansas City, we get winter,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And in the winter, it's 25 to 30%, and that's mainly the lettuce. And speaking of lettuce, I just was talking about it a couple of days ago to somebody. If you calculate the organic lettuce in the store, it's $25 a pound. So it's even just that. Yeah, it considerably goes down because of our weather change. And I do grow in cold frames outside, but everything slows down because of the cold. So yeah, it's but about 75% in the summertime.
Oh, that's awesome. So what would you say is the biggest secret, or is there a biggest secret to making a garden successful? Because I know a lot of us, including myself, we've tried and we've had a little success. Like this year, we got some cherries, but the cherries only lasted like a week or two. Then we got some peaches, and then we got some tomatoes. And in
That's
the past,
great.
I've been able to get a little bit of lettuce to grow and stuff, but I haven't really had great success with,
Great success. Yeah.
producing volume. What would you say the secret or secrets are to actually being able to make that work?
Well, there's a few little steps. One is really to know your growing zone, or your hardiness zone, they might call it. So your temperature ranges. And I don't know if where you're at, I don't know how your temperature gets here in the fall and winter, but it's knowing which plants grow in your area. And then after that, as far as really the gardening, compost, 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 because compost is like, it's fantastic for your garden. It helps with drainage, it helps with nutrition for your plants, it helps with the microorganisms. I mean, it's just one of those. I'm constantly putting compost in my garden, and it'll help. So those three is knowing your hardiness zone, know where your plant, if you've got the appropriate plants, and when in doubt, compost it out, as they say. So and of course, water, sunshine, and all that ties into it. But those would be the top three that I'm always telling people about, because a lot of times we'll just go, hey, I want that plant, and they pop it in, and it doesn't do well, and you're like, well, let's see, this is let's see where this plant, if it fits in this environment. And sometimes it just doesn't. A lot of stores, big box stores especially, will give you just a generality of plants that will grow anywhere. But if you kind of go outside your typical tomatoes and maybe green peppers, I'm trying to think of what else is in there. It's been so long since I bought plants or seeds from those stores. I'm just like, what else do they sell? Those typically will do well. But if you go outside the basics, you could have a little trouble if you don't know if your plant is appropriate for your environment.
Yeah, that's good. That makes a lot of good sense for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I can see that. The other question that I would be curious about is, I know gardening kind of, I mean, especially during the whole, last few year pandemic thing, I think gardening got to be a little bit more trendy and common for a little bit. A lot more people were doing it, but then people have kind of cut back. And
Yep.
I've heard that people say, I know you mentioned the high cost per pound of like organic lettuce, but I've heard people
Yes.
say that sometimes gardening doesn't always save you money. So I would be curious, especially, like you're dealing with the average person who either doesn't do organic or only goes off of like the dirty dozen. So say they buy organic for the dirty dozen, but they don't always buy organic for everything. Can you really actually save money doing your own garden that way? Or is it not really going to save you money from what it costs to go buy the fruits and vegetables at the store?
Well, that is one of those, it fluctuates. If you're learning, the first year or so might not be as beneficial as far as saving money, just because you're learning, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer of what they call intensive planting. So I don't just plant a few little lettuce seeds. I like pack my gardens, and I build raised beds also. I pack my gardens full of vegetables, and that actually helps in saving costs. But those first 2 years, and it's timing of your plants, intensive planting, and also these fluctuate on my website as far as putting out ebooks and stuff, but it's also companion planting, which you can also plant different plants together to help each other to in order for them to produce more. And then the raised beds help. A raised bed helps because the roots go straight down as opposed to out. So you can pack more in, so you can intensively plant more. So those first 2 years are always the hardest. If you can get through that learning curve, usually people will see, honestly, will see results in 3. And of course, I don't want to wait for 3 years. Well, you can learn the first 2.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's really helpful. That's awesome. So is there anything else that you feel like people should know about you when it comes to, anything else you want to share about autoimmune healing and your healing journey, anything like that?
I always say to people, and I know you probably say the same thing, just a little differently. It's always one step at a time. There's always a solution out there. There's always a solution. And even with learning the gardening, it's one step at a time. Of course, we want to have it quick and have it now and get through it. But it's worth it if you do it correctly, or if you do it right the first time, and learn. It gets better and better as far as your health. And there is freedom on the other side. It just, a lot of my clients, my naturopathy clients, I've said, a lot of people with autoimmune and pain, it took us quite a bit to get into that. Unfortunately, it's going to take quite a bit to get out of it, but it is so worth the journey, and it's so worth the freedom on the other end of it.
That's awesome. That's true for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's like you don't just all of a sudden wake up one morning and have an autoimmune condition. Those things develop
Right.
over time. And a lot of
Right.
us don't realize that, but they do, whether it's developing gut issues that create the autoimmune or different things like that. Those things you don't just all of a sudden, and just like you don't all of a sudden end up 100 pounds overweight overnight either.
Right. And the body is wonderful because it compensates to a point. I mean, there might be something, and there might be little things that we ignore. I was a big, I'm fine. My stomach hurts, but I'll be okay. Not understanding like I had a gut issue, not understanding that cheeseburger and fries and Coke might have had something to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. Yeah. And I'm one of those people that has really high tolerance for pain. And while people say, oh, that's amazing, it's like, actually, it isn't all the time, because it means that I wait longer to go get help if I really do, in fact, need help, because the pain can blow up in your face.
You're in trouble when it's time to.
Really severe. And
Oh
so
gosh, yes.
having a high tolerance for pain is actually not really necessarily a great thing, but
Exactly. So yeah, I just, one step at a time, and you give yourself grace. That's the other. Don't beat yourself up if you fail. And I'm going to use cheeseburgers. That seems to be my theme today. If you eat a cheeseburger today, there's always tomorrow. That it's don't beat yourself up. It's not worth it. I always, whether it's gardening or naturopathy, it's fantastic that you're taking the step. It's fantastic. Pat yourself on the back. And if you fall down, failure is if you don't get up. Success is when you get up and try again the next time.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've heard that multiple times before. I'm sure that's not new news to anybody, but yeah, it's definitely totally true. It's like, you're not going to all of a sudden fix yourself overnight. You're not going to successfully give up every food or change your diet overnight like you feel like you should and do all the supplements and all the things. It's just not going to happen. So one little thing at a time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so we will include the links in the show notes as well, but why don't you, before we go, tell us what your website is, any of your socials, anything else that anybody should have?
Sure. My website is focused on the gardening. I still do the naturopathy, but you can reach me through my gardening website, which is, I know, kind of weird, but that is kitchengardenexpert.com. And I'm all over social media. I'm on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to that. And I even do recipes on YouTube. It's called Garden to Table Gourmet. And then I've got a whole bunch of gardening shorts and long videos. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Trying to think of, I think that's about it. But yeah, all over social media, Kitchen Garden Expert.
Cool. Well, we will include some of the links to that in the show notes. And unless you have anything else to share, I think that will be it for today then.
One more thing, if somebody wants to reach out and send an email, it's find me at kitchengardenexpert.com. But other than that, this has been great. Thank you for asking. This has been fun to talk with you.
Absolutely, for sure. Okay, so everybody, if you are interested in any of this, which if you're still listening to this, you should be, to go get some help with your garden, to learn a little bit about naturopathy and how that can help you with your autoimmune condition. And while you're at it, if you wouldn't mind liking and or rating my podcast as well, that will help it get out there to more people. Share it with anybody else you know that can benefit. Thanks, take care, and I will catch you soon on another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast.